book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I am here today to talk about my top 20 books of 2020. It's now almost 2021 as I'm filming this. It probably is 2021 by the time this video goes up. So I read 200 books, so that explains why I have a high number of books that I'm going to be talking about. But when I talk about books, I'm also talking about book series. So in terms of specific books that I'm going to mention, I'm going to mention the series as a whole as well, just to make it easier, because as much as I want to talk about specific books, I might bring up the specific books that I preferred in that series as well. But I think that when it comes to book series, sometimes it's good to kind of rank them together if you read the entire trilogy or the entire series in general, because sometimes the overall story is amazing and it beats another overall story. I guess without further ado, I hope that explains everything, and I will get into this list. You guys will find out the top 20 reads of the year, in my personal opinion. Let's go. I put this at number 20 because I wasn't too sure what to put at number 20. There's a lot of irony to it, but the reason why I put it at number 20 is because as much as I rated it a 2.5 out of 5 stars, I still can't get it out of my head. It has still kind of impacted me in some sort of way, and that's why Serpent and Dove made it onto the best list, which is very interesting. I know, I was thinking to myself, this should be on the least favorites list, but no. Serpent and Dove, I think, has made me think a lot and made me produce some really good conversation with people, to the point that it's kind of one of my favorites this year. It's really impacted me in a certain way in terms of the conversation I have about religion and the conversation that I have about circumstances that you grew up in childhood trauma, that kind of forces you to be the same way throughout your adult life, to the point that it's really hard to change your ways. And I love how this book kind of produces that conversation and shows that through this specific romance, and shows that in this world. I find that very fascinating. So that's why I had to add it to my list. It's not necessarily the best piece of fiction out there, but it's a very great conversation starter in those terms. And so that's why I had to put it on my list. But I swear everything else on this list is rated a lot higher than that. But number 19 will have to go to The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. The Silvered Serpents was just okay. That's the reason why it's kind of on spot number 19. I did enjoy The Gilded Wolves, don't get me wrong. The Six of Crows duology is not bad, but honestly, why do people compare these? This one's clearly better. I do enjoy Six of Crows, and don't at me. I like the characters and everything like that, but let's not compare them to. I think I was just able to connect to the characters and the writing better in this one, and like each novel was just a perfect length in my opinion. So that's why I kind of prefer this over the other high story, but I still do like the Six of Crows series. The Gilded Wolves, there were some characters that I was just so attached to, and then in the Silvered Serpents, I got annoyed with one of the main characters. I kind of understand his response to certain circumstances and certain situations when he's put in them, everything, but honestly, like, I kind of wish that I didn't spend that much time annoyed with him. This being said, The Gilded Wolves is a perfect first book in the series, and I'm kind of hoping that the third book in the series is going to match the standards of the first book. But number 18, we have a book that I actually forgot that I read this year. It was probably one of the first books that I read this year, and that, my friends, is Supernova by Marissa Meyer. You guys know that I love the Renegades trilogy, and the Renegades trilogy, Supernova was literally one of the only books that I purchased last year, and I was excited about but wasn't too sure about, and so I finally read it, and it kind of just reignited my love for reading again this year, and I'm really happy that it got me out of the reading slump. I don't think I could have asked for a better finale for this trilogy. I think that overall the trilogy was just perfectly done. It was well done, and I understand why people don't like it as much, but for me personally, I think that it does these superhero tropes perfectly. I think that the whole series is just a delight to read. I understand why people think that it was a bit slow, especially in the first book, but it is what it is, and I'm happy with it. In spot number 17, we have A Song of Race and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. I really enjoyed this book. I think even more the second time that I read it. So I read this book twice this year. First time, I think I just flew past it. It was one of those fast reading experiences. I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is so entertaining, so enjoyable. And then the second time, I just wanted to reread it so that I could soak it up, and that was the best kind of experience. It's very funny because I read this towards the end of the year, and I just realized that the sequel and the finale is coming out in May of next year. Oh my goodness, literally within 6 months time, we will have a finale to the series. I'm not ready for that. This series, in my personal opinion, needs to be a trilogy, because everything that happened in this first book is total setup for a trilogy. But also, I just really want more time with the two two main characters together and their interactions, because I feel like as much as we got a good amount of time in this book with them, we didn't really get enough. If we're going to have to buy into this being a romance, I do suggest that this be a trilogy. That's my personal opinion, but regardless, flawless first book in this series, and I'm so looking forward to this sequel, so it makes spot number 17 on my list. Did I even acknowledge Stitch right next to me, sitting on my evaporative cooler that we have to keep on a chair so it actually reaches us on the bed? So he covers the lights when we're sleeping. Spot to number 16 is a series that I only just read this year completely. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I expected it to be a favorite, but then when I first started it, I was thinking, I don't think this is gonna be a favorite, but I kept on reading it and I realized it was really good, and it probably did deserve being on my favorites. When I finally finished the trilogy, I decided it was gonna be a favorite. When I shut the book on the epilogue of The Burning God, that's when I realized it was gonna be a favorite. Anyway, I'm talking about the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. R.F. Kuang is my age. I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing right now? People are like, no, G-Swizz, you're talented. Don't discredit that. Okay, yeah, maybe I'm talented at the moment, but yeah, you know, I need to manage my time better, because clearly I probably have a gift that I just have not unlocked in maybe even writing or other some sort of, I don't know, creativity. Because R.F. Kuang have done it, they have succeeded at it, I'm happy for them. They are showing that millennials can write really good stuff. Honestly, this trilogy is an absolute genius concept. I do have to admit, it was a little bit triggering to me, because I'm not gonna lie, warfare in books kind of tends to upset me a little bit, so I have to try to be careful with it. And yes, this trilogy did have some upsetting moments for me, and I had to put the books down. That's why it's not like one of my absolute favorites. This being said, it's a really good read. It has an amazing plot. There are some amazing characters in here, and the way that the series ends breaks my heart, but at the very same time, it's logical. It makes sense, and it was just building up and foreshadowing to that moment, and I'm kind of satisfied with it. Coming in at spot number 15, very close to the other trilogy, is this trilogy, the Arc of the Scythe trilogy. Now, this was one of the first series I finished this year, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. I put this series off for so long. Just like the Poppy War, this series was also very distressing for me to read at times. Don't get me started with the airplane scene that happens at the beginning of the book. I was immediately turned off, and I had to put the book down. I'm like, I cannot do this. I cannot keep reading this book, because the series is kind of terrifying to me. But it is a genius concept when it comes to immortality and life, and how people use their lives, but also how some people have to sacrifice other people's lives in order for some people to live in this very weird society that is fair but also is not fair. It's a very genius concept, and so I have to give it to Neil Schusterman. He's an amazing writer. I'm so happy that I read the Arc of the Scythe, but at the very same time, I was very disturbed while reading it. Not one of my favorite series, but one of the best book series that I read this year, and I'm definitely going to recommend this to everyone I possibly can recommend it to. And then we come to spot number 14, which is going to be the Shadow of the Fox trilogy by Julie Kagawa. I loved this trilogy a lot. In fact, the final book, once again, heartbreaking, but overall satisfying. All three books, I think, waiting for one thing to happen, it finally happens, and it's just honestly so good. So good! Ah! Finale was just epic as well. Everything was just so good. I really want this book series to be adapted into an anime. Netflix, please pick it up. This definitely made me conclude to myself that Julie Kagawa is one of my favorite authors, and I am going to continually read Julie Kagawa's books. So I'm looking forward to reading more of Julie Kagawa's series in the future. Spot number 13 goes to the manga of Neon Genesis Evangelion. This is funny because Neon Genesis Evangelion was probably my favorite anime that I watched this year. There was also a character in the anime that I preferred actually in the anime, and then when I read them in the manga, they just look a little bit edgy. Like, I just want to get to know more about them. I don't hate the manga adaptation, but I kind of liked the shock factor in the anime a little bit more, even though the ending to this one was a little bit more wholesome, and it kind of makes some sense for the story still, as well as the other one does. I don't know, I think I'm just so used to the ending of the anime being such a shocking conclusion. It also makes sense in the grand scheme of things. It makes sense biblically. At the end of the day, I think the anime adaptation was so focused on symbolism, and I actually enjoyed that because there was so much to unpack. Whereas manga adaptation, it was just pretty much grounded in the actual story, but there was some symbolism around there. I love both of them, and I appreciate them both for what they are, but I do prefer the anime adaptation now that I think about it. I think the anime adaptation, in my personal opinion, when I look at it, it's the one that I'm most fond of because there was so much much more to unpack, and I do like a few more plot points. But that being said, Neon Genesis Evangelion, it's been a year where this anime and manga has really impacted my reading life and has really impacted the way that I see things. So that's why it's on my list at spot number 13. Spot number 12 goes to the Seven Realms series by Cinda Williams Chima. This is a series that I put off for so many years, and I'm so happy that I finally read it. I decided to read it after I read The Remnant Chronicles. Honestly, The Remnant Chronicles took a while to get over. I was really sad about them, and I thought to myself, it ruined me for YA fantasy, because now I just don't want to read any more YA fantasy. And then all of a sudden, the Seven Realms series is just looking at me on the shelf and is like, you know what? Let me change your mind. And it did. I'm very satisfied with the Seven Realms series. I'm very satisfied with the direction of the story, and even though it has a very open-ended ending, I like that there is a spin-off series, and I'm going to be reading that spin-off series in the new year. I'm so excited for it, and I decided to wait until the Australian paperback of the final book in the spin-off series, the Shattered Realm series, comes out so that I can binge read all of them and we can see how this goes. I have to say, spot number 12 goes to the Seven Realms series. It was really good, and I recommend it to anybody who has been sleeping on it like I did for a long time. Spot number 11 goes to Bonecryer's Moon by Catherine Purdy. You guys have been hearing me talk about this book. I was not expecting to enjoy this book as much as I did. I wasn't expecting to enjoy these characters as much as I did. Yes, there was a character that really got on my nerves, and I really wish that they never happened to be in this story or weird conflict. Other than that, I really enjoyed the dynamics between all the characters. I loved the mythology in this world. I think that it was overall done amazingly. That's why I would recommend you read Bonecryer's Moon if you haven't yet. Give it a shot, see how it goes. It's a trilogy, and I'm very much looking forward to Bonecryer's Dawn in the new year. We are halfway through the list. Let's talk about the Demon Slayer manga series. Yes, that's made it to spot number 10. I'm pretty surprised that the Demon Slayer manga series was not my favorite manga series of the year, because the next one I'm just about to mention is my favorite manga series of the year. Demon Slayer, amazing manga series. Honestly, if you have not read Demon Slayer yet, or if you have not watched the adaptation, I highly recommend you do. If you like the things that I do, if you like fantasy, or if you like action, it has those things, and it's just done very perfectly. And also, if you like anime, like, it's perfect. Or if you like manga, it's perfect. I think it's very easy for people to see Demon Slayer as the normie thing to love now. I totally get that. I thought to myself, oh, I don't know if I'd like Demon Slayer because, like, people are talking about it all the time and it's mainstream. And then I finally watched it, and I totally got the hype. Honestly, it makes sense once you start watching it. I'd say don't listen to what people have to say, whether it's positive or negative. I mean, I know I'm recommending it to you now, and that's kind of ironic, but like, make the decision for yourself whether you're gonna watch Demon Slayer or not, or whether you're gonna read Demon Slayer or not, and go from there. I didn't pressure myself into doing it. I just decided to do it, and I was really happy that I did it. Demon Slayer, number 10. I love how every single person's backstory is done. There are only 4 volumes left to go to be translated in English. I'm so excited, and everybody in Japan already knows how it ends. I really hope no one spoils me. So that being said, spot number 9 goes to Beastars. I know, it's so weird. I was trying to fight between which one deserves spot number 1 in terms of manga this year, but I have to go with Beastars. The Beastars manga is just as good as the anime is. It's perfect. I recommend anyone pick up Beastars Volume 5. I mean, no, read up to Volume 5. Volume 5 has the best kind of intensity I've ever really seen in manga. Actually, no, I don't know, like Berserk and Beastars in that aspect, or at least in that volume, I don't know, like they just kind of not on par with each other. I can't compare anything to Berserk, but like it made me feel those same intense feelings that I felt when I was reading Berserk, when I was reading Volume 5 of Beastars. It was just that good. Honestly, Volume 5 of Beastars alone is one of the best volumes of manga I have ever read in my entire life. It is so good. The art style is just so fun to read. At times it looks very basic, but it's also very complex. Like, there are panels that take up an entire page or entire 2-page of the manga. It goes really well with the story. The artist and the writer knows what they're doing and knows how to translate their story, and it's perfect. That is why I love Beastars so much. Yes, I do love Demon Slayer for similar reasons, but in my opinion, Beastars in terms of art and translation just beats Demon Slayer. In spot number 8, we have the Deva Bad Trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. Now, this was a big surprise to me. This entire trilogy, people have been hyping up to me for so long, and as someone who is Middle Eastern myself, sometimes I get very skeptical on Middle Eastern fantasy because I'm afraid that there are some things that are too stereotypical, and then there are not too many niche Middle Eastern things in there that will kind of balance out the stereotypical. I'm just Middle Eastern myself, so sometimes when I read Middle Eastern fantasy, I feel that way. But the David Bad trilogy had a good balance of everything. On top of that, a compelling story. And I have to say this right now, I love Ali. Yes, I do like Dada as well. And yes, some things that happened to the characters were just so tragic, but overall, the story was great. It was so gripping. It was so heartbreaking, but it was so amazing at the same time. I could connect with so many characters. I just loved it so much. The David Bad trilogy is in my top 10 for the year. I've been consistently feel like rereading it all year, and I have been rereading some books. I just haven't been rereading the David Bad trilogy. I think it's because the books are pretty long, but I will get to it. Number 7, we have The Princess Will Save You by Sarah Henning. This book I've mentioned previously, I felt really resonated with in the romance of this book, and even in the main character. I just love this book so much because for me personally, it felt realistic because there's just so much sincerity in it. Yes, there are some flaws in it, like for example, I do think that we could have had some more time with the love interest at the very beginning to kind of develop the relationship for the reader to see, but I just love how their love and their sincerity in their love is translated through what they are doing to get out of this situation, and that's what I love about it so much. I love the overall message about this book, and the overall message about this book is love. I love that. And now we're going to talk about a book series that has toxic love in it that made it to spot number 6, and I will acknowledge that right now. I do love my fantasy romance, and there are times where romance can be toxic in certain books. That is definitely prominent in this book trilogy. So I'm going to be talking about the Imperium Trilogy by Claire Legrand. This trilogy, absolutely amazing in its writing and in its continuity. Like, you already know what happens from the very beginning, and you try to feel hopeful for the end of Lightbringer, and I understand why a lot of people did not like Lightbringer. It was very depressing, I get it. But overall, as a trilogy, the Imperium Trilogy was a very well done trilogy. No, the romance is not to be glorified, but everything happens within reason. The Imperium Trilogy comes to spot number 6, and I'm really happy that I read it. Spot number 5, Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. I recently reread this book because I wanted to know whether it was a favorite or not. I mean, I knew that it was kind of gonna make the favorites list, but I just wanted to remember its ranking, and I decided it's spot number 5. I mean, it was close to being like spot number 4, but then one of these books I read in December, and yeah, I just had to move it down a bit. Kafka on the Shore is a very fascinating book. That being said, there are things in this book that I do not condone. Funnily enough, I actually recently watched Jesse the Reader's review on it. What I loved that he said is that Murakami doesn't necessarily specify that the wrong things in this book are wrong, and I do have to acknowledge that. There are a fair few things in this book that shouldn't be justified, and I kind of do wish that it was clarified that they are wrong. I think it's because I have a moral compass, and I think some of us have a moral compass. We can see that they're wrong, and we're reading the book, but we're reading it for the sake of themes at times, and some people will be more critical about it, and that's totally understandable given the circumstances of Murakami not really specifying the actions of the protagonist and the people in the book being wrong. But the overall message of the story, I think, is a very powerful one. You know what? My top 3 books on this list and Kafka on the Shore have to do with loneliness. I think I am attracted to books with the theme of loneliness, and that's kind of a problem in a way because it's very triggering to me. This book has to deal with loneliness and abandonment. I think that's why it resonates with me so much, and I love talking about it with Camillo. He's currently reading it at the moment. Yeah, he's taking his time with it. I love that I get to talk to him about Murakami's books and their themes, because even though, honestly, in his writing, I do think that he needs to clarify what is right and what is wrong. At the end of the day, I think I read his books because I love his themes. Kafka on the Shore, it was a very impactful book to me. It's my favorite Haruki Murakami book, and that's why I reread it, and I will be rereading this book in the future. And now we've come to spot number 4, Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. I loved this first book in a new series by Cassandra Clare. In fact, I will go as far as to say it's probably my favorite book by Cassandra Clare so far. I cannot believe that I felt such an attachment to this book series and its characters, and like the fact that they have a Middle Eastern main character, just for me, that just makes me so so happy. I love seeing Cordelia there. That being said, why do you have to make Grace the unlikable character? Like, seriously, why do I have to share a name with an unlikable character? That being said, I am kind of rooting for Grace. I only hope that she has a redemption arc because I don't want to be associated with a character who's a horrible person who shares a name with me. Chain of Gold was a great book, and I'm so excited for Chain of Iron, and it's just making me want to reread the Infernal Devices series. I mean, like, let's talk about the Illumicrate editions. Oh my goodness, that's gonna take my money. I'm just so sad that I didn't actually collect the Chain of Gold collector's edition. What I love about reading new series from Cassandra Clare is that you're reminded as to how far Cassandra Clare has come in this series every time. I was also reading the Red Scrolls of Magic this year as well, which is an honorable mention. Did not make my list, but it was very close to. I was just thinking to myself, wow, Cassandra Clare has really come far. Chain of Gold was a really good book, and I cannot stop thinking about it. Now we've come to spot number 3, which was the unexpected read of December that ended up making my list and ended up skyrocketing high up there. In fact, I was thinking before I was reading it, or actually when I was starting to read it, I was like, okay, maybe this is gonna make like 20 on my list, or maybe 18 on my list, maybe 15 on my list. It's gonna be like low there because I've already made up my mind about my list. And then I read this book and I'm like, no, this is in my top 3. This book is so impactful to me. This book has hurt me so much. In fact, all 3 of my top 3 have hurt me, have broken my heart, have made me cry of a broken heart in a sense. It's just have given me some sort of like book hangover. I just have so many withdrawals. Like, I just had to keep myself from trying to think about the book, but I just could not stop thinking about the book. I would have sleepless nights over these 3 books. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Victoria Schwab, or by V.E. Schwab. I mean, you know, they've used the V.E. Schwab pen name for this book. Oh my god, I'm so overwhelmed just thinking about this book. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I started reading and I was compelled instantly. As I mentioned, books about loneliness and about abandonment, they get to me. This is why I see a psychologist. I'm not going to talk about these issues on my channel. But yes, big issue that's obviously had to deal with in my life. So whenever I'm reading a book that has to do with that, it just hits hard. But also when I see a character, when I see some characters who can kind of relate to my situation or have been put into a much worse situation, but give me hope in my situation, it means a lot to me. Addie LaRue was one of those people for me. And also, I think I deeply resonated with this book because I read an article about Victoria Schwab talking about her life and how Addie LaRue is the character that she's wanted to write about for so long, because Victoria sees themselves in Addie. First of all, I shed a tear while I read that article, and then second of all, I thought about that article when I was reading this book, and I can see it. But also, I felt so proud of Victoria. Like, I met Victoria at a book signing, and it was only just brief and stuff, but we had an amazing discussion, and that night was actually the first time I heard about Addie LaRue. And so I was thinking to myself, yeah, I'm really excited for this, and yes, Victoria is an amazing person, and I'm really happy that I met Victoria. They were just so kind to me. And then just reading about Addie LaRue, I mean, like, I know that authors put their heart and soul into their work, but I could just really see it with this one because Victoria has expressed how much Addie means to them and how much the story has meant to them. It has impacted me so much, and I can't talk about it without getting emotional. So I have to move on to another book that makes me emotional now. I'm gonna go to spot number 2. Once again, like, it's a book that deals with loneliness. Sometimes you go into this person's book to have a fun time. And yes, I'm gonna be talking about House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. Yeah, you go into Sarah J Maas's books to have a fun time, but also there are times where Sarah J Maas just hits you with some deep stuff, man. This book has probably one of the most tragic starts to a Sarah J Maas book or a book series. It is heartbreaking to have to experience that and then read about it as well. I think rereading it again towards the end of the year, because once again, I just wanted to see whether it ranked high or low or second on my list, and it did rank second on my list. It was very close to being first and stuff, but like number 1 is number 1 for personal reasons. This book deals with loneliness, but it also deals with love. Love is a very prominent theme in this book. Similar aspect to The Princess Will Save You. I love when love is at the very center of either a plot of a book or whether it's talked about as a theme, because love for me is one of my biggest values. I don't know if that's because the whole loneliness factor or anything, but like when love is sincere, it's a beautiful thing. I love seeing that translated into books and into fiction, and that is why I loved that House of Earth and Blood encapsulated all of that, and that is why it is spot number 2 on my list. And here we come to the final book that I have to talk about. I think a lot of you guys guys know where this was going. If you've watched videos of me mentioning that this was my favorite book I read this year, and yes, it still is my favorite book of the year, and I knew that this was gonna be #1 from the time that I read it. I've read this book 5 times now. Once again, I tend to be attracted to books that deal with loneliness, and Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth is one of those books. It's one of those books that deals with loneliness, it deals with trauma, but it also deals with hope in the sense that it's okay to continue living after those things and to continue to be yourself in spite of that. I also read this book at a very hard time because I was still trying to accept what happened last year. And it was really hard to process because it's really hard to explain to people what you went through when it's hard for anyone to understand. I cannot make anyone in my life, including my partner, I cannot make them understand what it's like not to enjoy things or what it's like not to experience serotonin in the brain. But it's a thing, and it happened, and it was something that I really needed to get out of. There's a lot of trauma that I experienced from it. There's a lot going on in my head, and so Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth helped me deal with that. And so that's why I held onto it so much. I held onto Sloane as a comfort character for me. Mox is a comfort character for me. I'm so thankful to Veronica for writing another book series that has to do with that kind of trauma and how it affects people, but also how we need to value everyone. And I know that a lot of people don't like this book series or don't like this book, period, and that's totally understandable because it's not for everyone. It's not in the niche that everyone likes. I don't think everybody likes superhero books or chosen one tropes or stories, even though this does turn those tropes on its head. And also dimension travel, because this book does have some dimensions in it. It's a very complex book. At the end of this day, I acknowledge that this book is not for everyone, but it has an amazing message. It has amazing characters, and I couldn't thank it enough because I don't think I would have gone far this year. I don't think that I would have been as brave as I was this year if I didn't have Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth to read and to help me keep going. And that is what I have to say about my favorite books of the year. I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. Let me know if any of these ended up on your list because I want to know. And also, if you stuck to the end of this video, give me a blue heart emoji. So everyone's purple heart emojis for one of my previous videos, and I was so impacted by that. It was just so beautiful. It made me so happy. If you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social medias. I'm at gswizzelbooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also at GOODREADS. It's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Have a happy new year. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.